There's no point trying to perfect what you're doing if you're losing money. But instead, you've got to get in the production zone. Hey, I'm Nadi, Elias, and this is the Daily Espresso. Now, there's no point in trying to be perfect because you lose financially when you do. Now, I want to be clear about this. People just don't pay for perfection. Perfection drains your output. You can't scale up or meet demand when you're getting bogged down in fine detail. And perfection takes time. And if you don't have time to waste, you lose customers when you take too long to deliver a product. And perfection decreases profitability. Wastage increases costs and it lowers your gross profit margin. You can't increase your sales to compensate for wastage. And when you're putting pressure on your gross profit, you end up with a net profit at the end of the day that becomes very hard to sustain. And in fact, you will not be pleased with it. Now, I want to draw your attention to a graphic representation of how perfectionism hurts your business. Now, let's flick to the law of diminishing returns on page 87 of Count Beans. So the law of diminishing returns in the following figure is an economic concept and it deserves a mention here. I'm sure many cafe owners don't really think of production and perfectionism as something that's graphically shown, but it definitely is. And this theory works predominantly in any production process. So in any business where something's being made. And you don't want to shy from the fact that you're a little bit of production, you're a little bit of manufacturing, using raw product, you've got human input, you've got machinery, and you're turning it into something awesome. The whole point of this theory is that in a production process, adding more of one factor of production while holding everything else the same will at some point yield lower returns. For example, spending 8 minutes on something that could take 5 minutes and produce an output just as good is decreasing your return by 60%. Now, that's massive. That's too significant to ignore, and it costs you money. It's one of the first concepts I had to deal with in my own business, and understanding this changed my mindset as a business owner and actually changed how my business goes about doing what we do. And it's something that I discuss with my team on a regular basis in terms of where we're putting more effort and still reaping the same result. So if we look at this, we'll find a couple of areas, well, in fact, 3 areas. There's a production zone, perfection zone, and negative returns. This graph is shown, we've got 2 axes, and on left-hand side of the vertical point, we've got output. So that's your quality and your quantity. And along the bottom there, or the horizontal axis, is input. It could be time, resources, effort, money, and so forth. And as we look at that, you can see the aligned curves from the left to the right-hand side. And as you can see on the left-hand side in the production zone, as you input more time, more effort, more product, you're actually getting better quality and better output. You want to focus on investing more time and effort here to get that part of your business right. But you can see that there's a point there, and that's where the first X is. That's where the border of production and perfection zone happens. And that's where high producers and profitable people stop there. That's what we call the point of diminishing returns. And what that essentially means is, from that point onwards, any extra effort that you put in does not yield or reap a reward in terms of output, so quality or quantity, that someone else is going to value enough to give you the reward for doing that. We're showing the extreme here when even a perfectionist stops, and that's outside the perfection zone. And then you've got negative returns where things just go pear-shaped and you're actually decreasing output. So whilst, don't get me wrong, whilst output's still increasing, there really is a tipping point in a negative way where no one, you're putting a lot of effort in and no one really values that anymore. I see a lot of businesses falling into this perfectionism category, the perfection zone. A lot of times they're doing stuff that they just don't need to do. They're spending too much time on things. They mean well, and without doubt, but they're just going overboard. And the problem that it's causing for the business, and a lot of this sometimes is actually done by the employees of the business, or a lot of times the employee of the business, because they just haven't been given the guidance or the limiters to tell them, okay, we'll get to this point and that's where it stops. We see it a lot in coffee, where baristas are just really putting way too much effort into what the customer's ultimately seeing and valuing. And this is just wrong because it limits production. It stops the ability, and if we put it in a example, being able to do 100 coffees an hour, instead you're only doing 80, just saying. That's the difference. It could be even worse than that. Now, that annoys customers and that costs the business money. There's a really cool ad I saw on YouTube that was put out by McCafe. Now, I don't normally talk about McDonald's other than when I talk about how much effort they put into their processes and systems. Now, if you want to look at it for yourself, go to McCafe UK, as in United Kingdom, video advert, and you're going to flip out because they are highlighting this exact point. Baristas, in this case, and business owners in the coffee space, adding so much effort into something that the end consumer, the person wanting to buy the coffee, just does not value. I see this, and it just makes me want to cry almost. And that's where I see latte art being done in a takeaway cup. All this effort goes into it, and then a lid gets put on, and the customer doesn't even get to see it. They only see the extra time it takes, the extra 10 seconds, 20 seconds it takes to do that. So if we looked at this law of diminishing returns, we looked at this curve, and we looked at the businesses that are shooting the lights out and doing well and getting to keep more of the money that they make because they're more efficient and they're still delighting customers, they might be touching on the perfection zone, but they're not going deep into it. If we looked at that curve, they're going no more than a little bit past that first X. And if there's something that you could do right now, it'd be looking at what you can do in your processes that eliminate that. Does 0.1 of a gram really matter when you're measuring out a dose? What I also want to mention is that you've got to be consistent. You've got to be massively consistent. The businesses that are shooting the lights out and making money and doing well, they're consistent in what they do. So if they're, within the production zone and they're just over into the perfection zone, they are consistently doing that. So no one, when I mean no one, the customer is not caught by surprise, and the business owners aren't caught by surprise of things changing radically. The thing is, as much as I talk about your business being about you, your product offering has to consider your customer. Now, being a perfectionist disregards your customer almost completely. A lot of them don't get it, they don't appreciate it, and simply won't pay for it. Now, none of this is good for financial success in business. Now, let's not confuse this with barista competition training and the amazing work that goes into it. The day-to-day operations of a cafe is not the practice ground for competition training. Make sure your team understand it. But if this is something that you believe in pursuing, then create the environment away from the customer side to develop this in your team. There's always a time and place for this stuff. So hopefully from that, you can understand, the graphical effect on your business when you put a little bit too much effort in. Whilst I'm not showing you the effect on a dollar's point of view, there's an immediate correlation between putting too much effort into something, being capped in what you can charge for it, and not making enough money because of that. So, the first step from here is to look at, take a deep look into what you're doing. Take a look at your team and ask them what they perceive as putting too much effort in for what it is that they're doing, and also what they believe the customer really wants. That's your starting point. If you like what you see, please like, share, subscribe, so you can keep up to date with more Daily Espressos. I'm Nadi, Elias. This is the Daily Espresso. Get cracking.